I was still drowning in the profound grief of losing my parents when my older sister suddenly appeared in the living room with an incredibly arrogant attitude. She did not even bother to greet me before pointing her manicured finger straight toward the front wooden door. Her voice echoed sharply off the walls as she issued a ruthless command without a single ounce of empathy. "Why have you not moved out of this house yet?" she screamed while glaring at me with absolute disdain. "Get out of here right now." Faced with that ultimate level of absurdity from someone sharing my bloodline, I simply maintained a completely calm demeanor. I looked directly into her furious eyes with a gentle smile playing on my lips before delivering my definitive response. "Why exactly should I be the one to leave?" I asked her in a steady tone that betrayed no emotion. "The only person who actually needs to get out of this house right now is you." Hearing those unyielding words of defiance from a younger sibling who had always remained silently obedient, her face immediately froze in absolute shock. Her entire body stiffened awkwardly as she struggled to comprehend the situation, unknowingly setting the stage for a series of highly unpredictable events. If you are curious to discover the hidden secret that allowed me to confidently turn the tables on my greedy sister, please hit that subscribe button right now. Join me to witness the entire dramatic unfolding of this intense family conflict waiting for you just ahead. Looking at her arrogant attitude back then brought back memories of those suffocating days from the past. I actively chose to remain in our quiet hometown of Sedona to personally take care of every single meal for Mom and Dad, assuming the daily physical responsibilities that a dedicated daughter should naturally shoulder brought a deep sense of purpose to my otherwise ordinary life. Preparing their morning coffee or meticulously managing their weekly medical appointments became my absolute priority, while the rest of the world seemed to rush forward. They desperately needed someone reliable to manage the complex household affairs because their physical health had slowly begun to decline over the recent years. I spent countless hours organizing their prescription medications or maintaining the beautiful garden Dad used to love tending to himself. My entire existence revolved around creating a safe environment where they could spend their final years without worrying about mundane household chores. Vivian had aggressively packed her designer bags and permanently moved out of this very house many years ago to chase a flashy lifestyle in a major metropolitan city. She completely ignored every single piece of genuine advice Mom and Dad offered regarding the severe dangers of living far beyond her actual financial capabilities. The bright city lights combined with exclusive VIP parties easily blinded her to the foundational family values we were both taught while growing up under this roof. She desperately wanted to surround herself with wealthy socialites, while fabricating an entirely fake persona to impress people who did not genuinely care about her. Our parents frequently tried to warn her about the inevitable consequences of such reckless behavior through long letters or voicemails. She simply threw those letters into the trash without even opening them, while actively blocking their phone numbers whenever they became too persistent. The emotional connection between Vivian and our family eventually became incredibly distant as the months rapidly turned into long years of absolute silence. She almost never bothered to pick up her expensive smartphone just to check on the declining physical health of Mom or Dad. Countless weeks would pass without a single text message or even a brief holiday greeting card to reassure our aging parents of her basic safety. The only time her name ever illuminated our caller ID screen was when she found herself trapped in yet another massive financial crisis that threatened her luxurious facade. Those exceptionally rare phone calls were never driven by genuine familial affection, but rather by a desperate need for immediate monetary rescue from her mounting credit card bills. She would abruptly cut the conversation short, the exact second she realized Mom or Dad were about to ask about her personal well-being. Time after time, Vivian would formulate elaborate excuses to beg our parents for incredibly large sums of cash to supposedly cover emergency medical expenses or sudden rent increases. She consistently delivered firm promises to repay every single penny the moment she secured a stable corporate job or received her highly anticipated annual bonus. Mom and Dad would reluctantly wire the requested funds directly to her checking account out of pure parental guilt combined with deep concern for her safety. Once the digital financial transaction was fully completed, she would completely vanish without leaving a single trace or answering any of our follow-up phone calls. We would later see vibrant pictures of her posted on social media, flaunting expensive designer handbags, or traveling to exotic vacation resorts, using the exact money she had just begged for. She brazenly paraded her stolen wealth online without feeling a single ounce of shame regarding the lies she told the people who raised her. Witnessing the painful resignation reflecting in the tired eyes of Mom and Dad as they dealt with their increasingly lost daughter consistently broke my heart into a million pieces. They quietly absorbed the severe emotional damage while significantly cutting back on their own basic living expenses just to accommodate her endless financial greed. Their silent suffering pushed me to make a solemn vow to myself regarding my own career independence and the future stability of our entire household. I aggressively built my professional career in town while carefully monitoring the remaining funds within our family bank accounts to prevent total economic ruin. I promised myself that I would stand firm as an unbreakable shield to protect the final remaining assets of our family from being completely drained by her endless psychological manipulation. I legally took over the management of the estate finances to ensure she could never again exploit their unconditional love for her selfish gain. That morning arrived just like any other weekday, until a fateful phone call from the Central Hospital permanently shattered my entire existence. The unfamiliar voice of an emergency room doctor firmly delivered the devastating news that Mom and Dad had passed away following a severe traffic collision. My hands violently trembled as the heavy smartphone slipped from my grasp to clatter against the wooden floorboards, while my brain desperately struggled. The sheer suddenness of losing both my parents simultaneously created a massive, suffocating void in my chest that made breathing feel incredibly difficult. I collapsed onto the nearest sofa while vividly recalling their cheerful voices from just a few hours prior before they departed for their routine trip. Organizing the complex funeral arrangements fell entirely onto my shoulders during a time when simply standing upright required an enormous amount of physical energy. The actual memorial service took place 3 days later inside the crowded local chapel filled with deeply grieving relatives paying their final respects. I stood completely motionless before the 2 polished wooden caskets, while experiencing a profound level of emotional devastation that words could never adequately describe. Swallowing the bitter lump in my throat became my primary defense mechanism against breaking down completely in front of the numerous sympathetic attendees. The sudden departure of the 2 people who anchored my entire world forced me to maintain a stoic exterior to honor their lifelong dignity. Guests continuously approached to whisper comforting words, while I simply nodded politely to acknowledge their presence without actually comprehending anything they were saying. My focus remained entirely fixated on the framed photographs resting atop the closed caskets, showcasing Mom and Dad smiling brightly during their 30th anniversary. Right in the middle of the solemn ceremony, Vivian made a highly dramatic entrance alongside my sister's boyfriend, Vince, whom we had never officially met. They immediately launched into a theatrical performance of weeping uncontrollably while deliberately seeking out the largest clusters of observing family members nearby. Vivian practically threw herself onto the nearest relative while loudly wailing about her supposed heartbreak to ensure absolutely everyone witnessed her fabricated sorrow. Vince continuously rubbed her shoulders while occasionally dabbing his own dry eyes with a pristine white handkerchief to play the incredibly supportive partner. Their exaggerated display of mourning starkly contrasted with the years of complete silence they had inflicted upon Mom and Dad while they were alive. I watched their meticulously calculated performance from across the room, feeling a deep sense of disgust masking my overwhelming grief for a brief moment. The sheer audacity of their presence escalated further once the primary service concluded, and people began gathering at our family estate for the reception. Amidst the chaotic crowd of mourners navigating the living room, Vivian suddenly grabbed Vince by his suit sleeve to pull him toward the dining area. She began openly evaluating the property with a sickening level of enthusiasm that completely ignored the tragic reason for our current gathering. This area has a great location, so it can fetch at least $500,000. Vivian announced loudly enough for me to hear perfectly. Look at that vintage furniture set over there because it will definitely sell for a real bargain at an estate auction. Vince nodded enthusiastically while actively scanning the surrounding decorations as if he were shopping inside a retail store instead of attending a wake. Hearing her casually appraise the lifetime achievements of Mom and Dad as mere inventory items made my blood boil with intense fury. The crowd of respectful visitors eventually began to thin out as the evening approached, leaving behind a massive amount of scattered plates and empty cups. The exact second the last few important relatives walked out the front door, Vivian suddenly stopped her fake crying to instantly drop her grieving act. She did not offer a single word of genuine comfort or even ask how I was coping with the monumental task of managing the estate. Vivian simply signaled Vince toward the exit while stepping right over a pile of discarded napkins without bothering to assist with the overwhelming cleanup process. They quickly jumped into their rented vehicle parked in the driveway before speeding away to escape any actual physical labor awaiting inside the house. I stood alone in the center of the devastated living room, realizing their brief visit was motivated entirely by financial greed rather than familial duty. 1 week after the funeral concluded, the heavy silence occupying the entire house was suddenly shattered by a jarring phone call from Vivian. The piercing electronic ringtone echoed aggressively down the empty hallway, forcing me to abandon the kitchen chores I was utilizing as a minor distraction. I reluctantly answered the ringing device only to hear her voice coldly announcing an immediate plan to sell the entire estate without any prior consultation. She spoke with an incredibly detached tone, while enthusiastically explaining how the local real estate market prices were currently experiencing a massive upward trend. Her rapid speech completely disregarded the profound emotional weight attached to the property where Mom and Dad spent their entire adult lives together. She simply viewed the structural foundation and the surrounding land as a highly lucrative financial asset ready for immediate liquidation to the highest bidder. Hearing her casually discuss the immediate disposal of our childhood home caused a massive wave of righteous anger to completely overtake my initial shock. Are you completely out of your mind to even suggest such a ridiculous thing right now? I practically screamed into the phone receiver while gripping the plastic casing with intense physical force. This property is the only meaningful keepsake Mom and Dad left behind for us after their tragic passing. I continued with a fiercely protective tone. I absolutely will not let anyone sell it off to random strangers just because you suddenly decided you need a massive pile of quick cash. My voice reverberated through the empty living room as I firmly established my unwavering boundaries regarding the future preservation of our beloved family sanctuary. Allowing a group of greedy developers to bulldoze the exact location where our parents built their entire legacy remained an absolute impossibility in my mind. Vivian completely ignored my furious reaction while aggressively raising her own vocal volume to dominate the incredibly tense verbal exchange happening across the phone line. You really need to stop being so incredibly stubborn about this entire real estate situation immediately, she yelled back, with a venomous edge slicing through her previous fake politeness. I am the eldest sister in this family, which means I possess the absolute right to decide everything happening around here from now on. Her incredibly shameless declaration openly confirmed she viewed the tragic passing of our parents as nothing more than a golden opportunity to settle her debts. She desperately needed a massive influx of immediate capital to satisfy the aggressive creditors continuously hunting her down across the major metropolitan city. Paying off the countless credit card bills she accumulated over the past decade clearly took absolute precedence over respecting the final wishes of our family. Realizing my defensive stance remained entirely unyielding despite her screaming tactics, only caused her frustration to visibly multiply into something much more dangerous. The tone of her voice transformed into a deeply bitter snarl as she realized I would never willingly sign away my legal rights to the property. She bluntly declared her firm intention to utilize every single extreme measure available to forcefully kick me out of the residence in the shortest time possible. Her terrifying words contained a very real promise of impending hostility, designed to completely break my spirit through whatever manipulative legal or physical means necessary. She promised to bring professional real estate agents to forcefully appraise the interior rooms, regardless of my personal feelings on the matter. Threatening to arrive unannounced with moving boxes demonstrated exactly how far she was willing to push boundaries to achieve her incredibly selfish financial goals today. Refusing to waste another single second arguing uselessly with a completely irrational madwoman who only cared about money, I immediately disconnected the aggressive phone call. Tossing the silent mobile device onto the counter allowed me to quickly refocus my scattered thoughts toward establishing a much stronger defensive perimeter. I rapidly booted up the main computer terminal located inside the office to thoroughly review the entire digital security camera system surrounding the property. Meticulously checking the external viewing angles for every single lens ensured there were absolutely no hidden blind spots available for potential intruders to exploit unnoticed. Taking these proactive protective measures felt completely necessary to prevent any sudden vandalism or coordinated sabotage attempts orchestrated by Vivian without any warning. I spent the remaining daylight hours testing the various motion sensors attached to the front gates to guarantee my absolute safety against her promised invasion. A few days after that intense confrontation, while I was deeply focused on handling urgent tasks at the office, my smartphone screen suddenly emitted a continuous red alert signal from the security camera system installed at home. The persistent vibration against my desk surface immediately drew my attention away from the complex spreadsheets I was meticulously reviewing during the busy afternoon hours. I hurriedly opened the live surveillance application only to witness a terrifying scene unfolding in high definition right before my very eyes. Through the crystal-clear digital lens, I watched with absolute horror as Vivian and Vince were brutally using heavy metal tools to break the rear entrance lock. They forced their way inside with a shocking level of aggression before immediately beginning to rummage through the private belongings stored inside the main living room area. Their frantic movements indicated they were searching for something specific, while completely disregarding the sanctity of the place I worked so hard to preserve. They acted with an incredible level of excitement while desperately hunting for important legal documents or hidden financial records stashed away inside the antique wooden cabinets. Vivian began grabbing my personal possessions with both hands before heartlessly throwing them directly onto the muddy lawn outside the open back door. Every single memory I had carefully organized was being treated like worthless trash by the one person who should have respected our family history the most. The sight of my private journals and professional folders fluttering through the air to land in the dirt caused a massive wave of nausea to wash over me. Vince assisted her with a sickening grin on his face, while he aggressively cleared the shelves to make room for his own selfish intentions. They moved through the hallways like professional scavengers who had absolutely no regard for the emotional destruction they were causing to the environment Mom and Dad created. While throwing my favorite ceramic lamp onto the grass, Vince let out a loud, mocking laugh that echoed through the empty corridors of our childhood home. "You really need to hurry up and toss every single piece of her garbage outside so we can finally call the appraisers to value this entire furniture collection today," he shouted enthusiastically toward Vivian, who was busy emptying the nearby bookshelves. "That is exactly right, because we should also unmount this expensive television right now to take it directly to the local pawn shop for some quick cash," he continued with a greedy glint in his eyes while reaching for the electronic cables. Hearing his disgusting plan to liquidate our family assets for pocket change made my entire body tremble with an uncontrollable level of righteous fury. Their casual conversation about selling off my parents' legacy demonstrated a complete lack of basic human decency or familial respect. The intense anger boiling within my chest reached a breaking point as I realized I could no longer sit idly by while they literally dismantled my entire life. I immediately grabbed my leather handbag and abandoned all my professional responsibilities without providing a single word of explanation to my confused colleagues in the office. I rushed toward the parking garage and slammed my foot onto the gas pedal to drive directly home at the highest possible speed allowed by law. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird while I navigated through the heavy afternoon traffic with a singular focus on protecting my property. Despite the overwhelming urge to scream in frustration, I desperately tried to maintain a completely cold and analytical mind to prepare for the inevitable confrontation ahead. I needed to be strategically ready to handle these two intruders the moment I stepped onto the driveway of my violated sanctuary in Sedona. 30 minutes later, when my vehicle finally screeched to a halt in the familiar driveway, a scene of devastation immediately greeted my eyes through the dusty windshield. I stepped carefully over the scattered remains of my personal belongings and broken household items to confront the two intruders standing arrogantly inside the house they had just violated. Vivian stood there with her chin held high while she confidently tossed a thick stack of forged transfer documents onto the heavy oak dining table. She claimed that she had officially authorized every single right to the property through her own fraudulent signature as the oldest surviving child. Her eyes glinted with a terrifying level of self-assurance as she waited for me to crumble under the weight of her latest heartless manipulation. "Potential buyers are scheduled to view this entire property during the upcoming weekend, so you really should disappear from my sight before they arrive at the front gate," Vivian shouted while aggressively pointing her finger toward my face. "I have already signed every necessary document to finalize the sale, and you should take this handful of pocket money to find a local motel for a few nights." She tossed a few crumbled bills toward my feet, with an incredibly insulting smirk that demonstrated her complete lack of empathy for our shared history. Vince stood silently in the background, while he enjoyed watching the humiliating treatment she was currently inflicting upon her own younger sister within our childhood home. Recognizing that engaging in a direct verbal confrontation would be useless and strategically disadvantageous right now, I decided to remain completely silent while formulating my next move. I quietly gathered my professional laptop along with several essential folders containing my personal financial records before placing them securely into the trunk of my car. Without offering a single word of explanation or reacting to her petty insults, I firmly shut the vehicle door and drove away from the scene. My primary focus shifted toward a specific destination where I knew I could find the legal ammunition needed to dismantle her entire fraudulent scheme before she could do more damage. I navigated my car directly toward the professional office of the lawyer of our family, Arthur, who had been a trusted friend to Mom and Dad for over 30 years. Arthur possessed a deep understanding of our family legal affairs and held the original records that Vivian desperately wanted to ignore for her own selfish financial gain. Inside his quiet, private office, Arthur carefully opened the heavy metal safe to retrieve the original confidential will that Mom and Dad had meticulously drafted many years ago. He pointed his finger toward a specific and highly unusual trap clause that had been strategically placed within the legal document for our collective protection. The legal language clearly stated that any beneficiary who utilized dishonest tactics or physical force to seize family assets would be automatically disqualified from the entire inheritance. This meant that by her very actions today, Vivian had unwittingly triggered her own complete disinheritance without even realizing the legal trap she had just fallen into. Under the firm legal guidance provided by Arthur, we began to study every single potential loophole to ensure our counterattack would be absolutely flawless. We spent the evening crafting a sophisticated plan to expose her fraudulent documents during the upcoming public auction event she was organizing. Every detail was meticulously calculated to maximize her public humiliation when the truth regarding her disinheritance was finally revealed to the world. I felt a renewed sense of strength knowing that the legacy Mom and Dad worked so hard to build was finally safe. That Saturday evening arrived with the entire front lawn of our Sedona estate illuminated by dozens of bright decorative lights. Vivian and Vince were hosting an upscale garden party to enthusiastically welcome potential buyers who were interested in purchasing our family property. They were serving expensive wine and appetizers while circulating through the crowd of wealthy investors to brag about the historical value of the house. I watched from the shadows of the driveway for several minutes before realizing that the high-stakes auction was reaching its critical peak. The atmosphere was filled with the sound of laughter as strangers discussed how they would remodel the rooms Mom and Dad had built with their own hands. Right at the moment, Vivian was holding an expensive pen to sign the deposit paperwork for a prominent local investor. I stepped forward. I walked directly through the main front entrance alongside Arthur with a completely calm demeanor that immediately commanded everyone's attention. We moved with a level of unwavering confidence that caused several guests to stop their conversations and stare at our unexpected arrival. Vivian froze in mid-motion as her eyes locked onto mine, while she tried to process how I had managed to return so soon. Arthur carried the thick leather file containing the original legal documents under his arm, like a shield against her ongoing deception. Arthur stepped forward without hesitation and slammed the heavy original document file onto the wooden table with a loud, resounding thud. He looked directly at the shocked group of potential buyers before delivering his clear and authoritative announcement regarding the legal status of the property. This entire real estate transaction is completely illegal because my client currently holds the original will that effectively strips all inheritance rights from Vivian right now, Arthur declared in a steady voice. The specific clauses within this legal document were triggered the very moment she attempted to seize this property through fraudulent means and physical intimidation. The potential buyers immediately pulled back their hands from the table as if the paperwork had suddenly caught fire, while they exchanged confused glances with one another. Seeing her attempt to maintain her composure failing miserably, Arthur added another stern warning designed to finish her remaining resistance. If you continue to be so stubborn about this situation, we will immediately file a massive lawsuit against you for illegal trespassing and forging official documents today, he stated with a cold gaze. We have high-definition camera footage of your every move inside this house, and we will not hesitate to provide it to the police within the hour. Her arrogance was being stripped away in front of the people she was trying so hard to impress with her fabricated wealth. She looked around the porch for support, but even her partner seemed to be backing away from the legal reality of their situation. After hearing the clear legal declaration along with the undeniable evidence, the crowd of potential investors began to mutter angrily among themselves. They quickly realized they were nearly swindled into a massive legal nightmare by a woman who did not even possess the legal right to stand on this lawn. Several guests began to demand their identification papers back while expressing their deep frustration regarding the complete waste of their professional time. The once festive atmosphere turned sour as people began to cancel their tentative deals and hurriedly walk toward their vehicles parked along the street. Within minutes, the bustling garden party was reduced to a few abandoned wine glasses as the potential buyers vanished into the night. The face of Vivian transformed from a pale mask into a state of pure, uncontrolled insanity as her entire financial plan crumbled. She completely lost all sense of self-control while she and Vince began to scream incredibly vile insults toward me with a level of hatred. You think you have won this battle, but I will spend every single cent I have to make sure you end up on the street, Vivian shrieked, while her voice cracked from the intensity of her rage. Just as the situation threatened to escalate, the local private security team I had hired earlier arrived at the scene to restore order. They moved quickly to surround the area and began the process of forcefully removing the two trespassers from the property. I stood my ground silently as they were escorted away from the home they had tried to steal from my parents. 3 months after the intense legal battle concluded inside the crowded courtroom, the presiding judge finally delivered a definitive ruling that completely stripped Vivian of her entire inheritance rights. The court recognized her blatant attempts at document forgery and unauthorized physical trespassing as sufficient grounds for her immediate and permanent disqualification from the family estate. Not only was she legally removed from the final will, but she was also ordered to pay a massive financial compensation for every single piece of property damaged during her illegal intrusion. Watching her face crumble as the gavel struck the wooden block provided me with a profound sense of closure that I had been desperately seeking since the funeral. The legal system had successfully protected the final legacy of my parents from someone who viewed their passing as nothing more than a personal payday. Vivian stood there in stunned silence while the harsh reality of her failed scheme began to settle into her increasingly desperate mind. Leaving the courthouse with absolutely nothing to her name, Vivian now faced a mountain of staggering personal debts and astronomical legal fees that she had no hope of ever paying. Her once glamorous lifestyle was permanently shattered as the local bank moved quickly to seize her remaining assets to satisfy the aggressive creditors who were closing in from every direction. Vince did not hesitate for even a single second before abandoning her the exact moment he realized she no longer possessed any financial value or potential profit. He vanished from her life without offering a single word of support or even a backward glance while he searched for his next vulnerable target to exploit. This cruel betrayal by her own partner served as a final painful reminder of the shallow and transactional nature of the life she had chosen to lead, far away from her family. She was left entirely alone to navigate the consequences of her greed, while the bridge to her past home was now permanently burned beyond any hope of repair. With the noisy legal proceedings finally behind me, I returned to the quiet sanctuary of our family home in Sedona to begin the long process of physical and emotional restoration. I spent several weeks meticulously cleaning every corner of the house and repairing the structural damage caused by the violent intrusion of my sister and her boyfriend. Every single item of furniture was carefully returned to its original place, while I added small personal touches to honor the memory of the two people who raised me with unconditional love. Starting this new chapter of my life felt incredibly liberating as I embraced the peace and tranquility that Mom and Dad had always envisioned for their youngest daughter. I finally possessed the absolute freedom to preserve our family legacy without the constant threat of psychological manipulation or financial exploitation hanging over my head. Living within these walls now feels like a warm embrace from my parents as I move forward with a heart full of gratitude and a mind focused on building a meaningful future. Before ending today's story, please do not ignore the profound message hidden within this intense family conflict regarding the true value of our moral character and integrity. This narrative clearly demonstrates that while money can provide a temporary facade of success, it can never replace the foundational bonds of loyalty and respect we owe to our parents. The honor will always lead to an eventual and devastating collapse of one's entire world. If you found yourself in the same difficult position as Clara, would you possess the same level of courage to stand up against your own flesh and blood to protect your family legacy? Perhaps you have a different perspective or a unique way of handling such an extreme betrayal within your own household. Please share your personal thoughts and comments down below because your unique insights are incredibly valuable to our growing community. Thank you so much for listening to the end of this story, and I truly appreciate your